Are you in as like a student, or are you in as a leader, or what's your connection to SSA?
I'm a non-student. I actually, after, I don't know if you're familiar with the Reason Rally, but they were pushing people to join groups and have local communities, and I live near Pittsburgh. I don't live in Pittsburgh, but it's the closest major area, so it's like a 2-hour drive, and I was driving 2 hours to go down to meet with an atheist group, hang out for an hour, drive 2 hours back, so it was like a big waste of time.
Yeah, right.
So I called the Secular Student Alliance people, and they were like, oh yeah, we can have non-students. So it's a little awkward just because I'm a non-student.
Because there's so many students,
But I'm a lot more helpful because I'm not a broke college student, so I'm able to help more.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of nonprofits, they're always looking for people who have profit.
Right.
So they can survive.
Yep.
So you're, do you have a family? Are you married, or are you single, or what's your? I'm just asking more.
I'm in a long-term relationship, but I'm not married.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and your partner is of the same ilk, but not part of SSA, or also part of?
She's not an atheist.
Okay, she's not. Yeah. Okay. And did you grow up with some sort of, like probably most people in SSA, they grew up with some religious background and then deconverted or drifted or whatever you want to call it?
Yep.
And did that happen in college or before, or what was your story there?
I didn't like regularly attend church much.
Yeah.
But I was religious at least until I was like 21.
Yeah.
And then questions started happening. It probably took like 2 or 3 years before I actually said that I wasn't.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And did you feel like your belief in God was just sort of in the background of something you assumed, or something you'd actually thought about and really believed before you drifted away from that?
Different at different points in life. Like younger, it wasn't really a thought. It was just obviously there's a God. There's not really any, duh.
Yeah.
And I remember even being questioned about it by relationship I was in high school.
Yeah.
She asked if I thought it was possible that there wasn't one, and I remember just the question even bothered me. Like, how could you even ask that? Obviously, there's a God. So I didn't even really question it until very very early 20s. Yeah,
I was an atheist even in middle school, actually.
Yeah,
and I'm obviously a Christian now, doing what I'm doing here with the iPUB, but I was through high school, and even I remember vividly in 6th grade being in a Sunday school class that I rarely ever went to a Sunday school thing in my family.
Yeah.
But I was in one, and I remember thinking, I don't really believe that. How do I even know this God is real?
Yeah.
And I didn't have the term atheism on my tongue, but I didn't believe it. And I certainly, through high school and middle school, very firmly said I do not believe any of this. And but then I'm not sure I was not an impressive thinker or anything like that. Just for a variety of reasons. It wasn't that I wasn't thinking, but I got to where I was. So was there any particular thing, you started talking to people who tried to present evidence for God, and you were like, none of that works? Or was there any particular cause?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things I know that sparked I feel weird saying decline, but the first, when I was 21, or right before I was 21, I guess, a friend of mine, I found out he was an atheist, and that's when the word finally popped up, and I remember being really confused about how you could even not believe in stuff, but still, it was just I knew it, and I was a little weird or concerned about it, but it never really came up. And then a few months after I found that out, he died in a car accident. So then I went to his funeral. And I already had a whole bunch of questions on my mind because he's just a really, really nice guy. And I am struggling with that whole, so is he supposed to go to hell? I don't understand. This doesn't make sense to me. He's such a great guy. Yeah. So then I started playing around with, hypotheticals, kind of doing the, purposely going to extremes, but, picturing, some sweet old lady who's just, the nicest person. I mean, obviously nobody's perfect, but you get just the closest perfect as you possibly can. And, she gives to charity, she does good things, but she doesn't believe in God. She deserves to burn in hell for eternity. And then the other extreme would be somebody like Hitler, 5
Yeah.
minutes before they die,
Right. Converts.
truly repenting.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they'd be well, not really, or something like that. But like,
Assuming it
let's
was
say,
genuine, yeah.
and he deserves heaven, and that question really, really bothered me. But then at his funeral, I don't remember what the right word is, but the minister, the person who's doing he mentioned like right at the beginning, the only way to heaven is through Jesus.
Yeah.
And I remember at first being like that. Well, he's right. And then he talked a little bit more. He said it again, and I'm like, come on. And then he said it again, and then he said it again, and then he said it again, and then it turned to anger because I realized that he's using my good friend's death to push his message. And that's
seemed shameless.
Yeah, to me that was just terrible. So all that did, I mean, it didn't change my mind about anything. I still believe.
Yeah.
But it sparked passionate search, that I spent a few years. Like first, I asked some family, questions that I had, and I thought they were really knowledgeable, and I discovered they actually don't really know that much.
Yeah.
And then I started trying to ask people who did know a little bit more. I still wasn't getting good answers. I asked, pastors and stuff like that. Still wasn't getting really good answers. I have a funny story there I won't get into, though. And then I went to YouTube, and this is 3 years along. And I actually, again, I feel weird using that term, but I would say my faith was restored. I got the answers I wanted.
Yeah.
So
you listened to some apologists or something.
Yeah, like I found
Christian
a couple videos that I really liked. They weren't like professional apologists; they were just YouTubers. And I was satisfied. If it would have stopped there, I think right now would be very different. But then they were making response videos, and I wanted to see what they were responding to.
Yeah.
So then I spent a few months arguing with atheists.
Yeah.
And then slowly over time, I found myself in the comments defending them. And eventually I was like, oh, wow, I don't believe I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Like my conversion story isn't exactly the same, but there's some similar elements, but it goes in the opposite direction, of course, which is quite funny. A lot of Christian friends of mine will ask me, are you really just, you're trying to be evangelistic, right, when you interview these people? And I'm like, well, I mean, yes, I believe in evangelism, but I don't believe that I can come up with this rhetorical strategy that if I say just the right things, whatever they are, that this person will more or less, whether they wanted to or not, will be led to share my belief and will now become a Christian. I think that seems to me it's a lot more mysterious than that, and I don't feel burdened that way. I feel more like I'm here to have an interesting and good conversation about things that matter to me. I think they matter to you too in some way, I'm guessing. So we're like it's an easy pair to have a really interesting conversation. I learn a ton when I have these conversations. I've definitely changed my opinions about at least some of the weight of some of the arguments that I previously might have thought were stronger than others. And I've just learned a lot just listening. And I feel like I wish every Christian did this. Yeah. But, I'm wondering what, there must be some, you're aware that you could have nothing to do with heaven or hell, no interest in that sort of doctrine about heaven or hell. It's obviously a biblical doctrine. Right. But you could, the people who've thought about God, written about God in the philosophical sense, predate, the New Testament discussions of hell, say. And so at some point you must have become aware that, Aristotle, who had an argument he formulated for God, is not a religious argument, and yet he held to it. So what was that experience like to sort of see that the heaven and hell stuff and some of these, what are very Christian, obviously Christian doctrines, Judeo-Christian doctrines, don't necessarily have to come into play to decide whether God is real or not. A lot of Hindus, some Hindu sects believe in monotheism and
I don't know. I just don't think they have a good enough reason to.
There's just not looking at those. There's just not enough merit or whatever.
Right. Right. I mean, like at first, didn't really think of like, more deistic gods or
No,
or
I'm
anything
sure
like
not,
that.
no.
But like, I think that, of course, the Christianity part is what fell away.
Yeah.
And at first, actually somewhere in the middle of my deconversion, I was checking out other things and
Yeah.
stuff, but all of those started falling away, and
Yeah, you just kind of slid right past them down the mountain.
Right. So
I think that's a pretty common, like I've seen that's very common. And as someone who's, like, my background's in classical languages and philosophy, history, and I teach in university. And I've thought so long about these things, and I've taught on them. And not in just sort of like some sort of narrow Bible context, more just the concept in the way Socrates approached these things, or Plato, or Aristotle, or Gödel, in the 20th century, that it seems like when I'm processing that information, I think, a lot of really serious thinkers have taken the arguments for the classical theistic God very seriously, have believed in this God, and have never come to think Christianity is real, or Jesus was the Son of God, or something like that. And I'm, so I'm curious when I interview people, do you feel like you've seriously entertained those possibilities, or do you feel like you kind of just slid psychologically, emotionally right past all those things, and you've never really been able to look at those arguments in real thorough ways? Or
I think I kind of have,
Yeah.
but like I wouldn't say. I actually think it's weird to say about the sliding past them emotionally, because I actually kind of want to separate the emotion, because whenever I stopped believing, I hated it because I lost a lot of comfort with. So emotionally, I stayed connected for a while.
Yeah.
Because the biggest thing for me, this isn't really answering your question, but like I know that a really big thing for me was being understood, and I always feel like people didn't understand me. So believing that there's somebody who understood every part of my life, my thoughts, why I think the way that I do about things, knows everything about me. When that disappeared, that felt terrible, and I hated that.
Yeah, you didn't wish it on yourself.
I wanted to still believe, and I didn't. But yeah, I'm still open.
Yeah, you sound
I'm still open to possibilities.
So what's been your
see
view
any-
that, so normally something eventually builds in its place, it builds up. So your sort of framework for looking at ultimate reality now is, I'll grant you that you're not superficial. You know that science, we can't just say we have a scientific view, because science itself, you read the physicists, and it turns out they talk a lot about God. There's a really good book on fine tuning, actually, written by a theist and an atheist, Luke Barnes and Gareth something, I can't remember his last name, but they're both, I believe they're both astrophysicists, but they're astronomers for sure. They're both physicists anyway, and they co-wrote a book on fine tuning. So the introduction is both of their voices. They each say things, and then the whole book is a combined effort where they both sign off on everything in the book, and then the end of the book is them dialoguing again. And it's brilliant. And one of the things is their open discussion about whether fine-tuning points to God, and they talk at length about this. Really interesting. And the fact that they're even having a serious discussion, two physicists, about whether this evidence points to God would seem to imply it's not stupid to think it might.
Okay.
Right? So I'm curious, just whether, like, your framework now, how do you sort of see it all in the ultimate sense? The universe is here. A lot of physicists don't think, maybe the majority, that it has always been here.
Yeah.
We have moral intuition. Is it purely, even if we say it developed from evolution, there's lots of complexities with that. Our eye, I'll say this to people, our eye has developed evolutionarily, okay, fine. But my eye detects shape, and shape is objective, it's out there, it's real. My eye detects it. And just because my eye was developed through evolution doesn't deny the reality of the sphere of the moon, the shape sphere, or the shape square. And so I could have moral intuition developed evolutionarily, and it detects a reality that's really there. Right? Like that would seem like that makes sense to me. Anyway, so I'm interested in how do you approach these things now? Big picture.
I'm not real sure. I think I just I try not to fill in the blanks with things that I don't know. Like if there's anything I don't understand, it pretty much stops at I don't understand, and I might seek to understand if it's something worth looking into. But I don't like ever insert any like supernatural possibilities unless I see that it could really be a possibility.
Yeah. So, like to me, that seems eminently reasonable.
Yeah.
In other words, it seems really problematic when someone says, I don't understand something, therefore, or it's difficult to understand, therefore I just plug God in.
Right.
Like I really think that counter has real teeth. But then there are a couple issues that don't seem like they're like that to me. So, in other words, granting a Big Bang, which I accept, I assume you do, or you think the evidence is
probably
to the degree you and I understand it seems like the scientists are probably right about that. But either way, that pushes us to what is very close to evidence for a beginning, or at least somebody who holds that there's a beginning to the universe. This evidence absolutely aligns with that view. So I don't think of that when I get to that question of how is the universe here, say, I don't really think of it as it's a difficult thing to understand or a thing I don't understand, therefore I just say God did it. I think of it as, well, it's inconceivable that the universe created itself. That's a philosophical, nonsensical thing to me. It seems totally inconceivable. So the only alternative is really quite simple, which is eternal existence, which is essentially Aristotle's argument. And not that he argued from a chronological beginning or whatever, but I mean it's that he felt pushed to an eternal existence. And you can call it God, but it's certainly not the universe. And that seems like it's very simple to me. Like it doesn't feel God in the gaps-ish or whatever. Like other things I clearly see are some arguments that I would say, those are more like people don't understand, so they just say God did it. Yeah. That's not very sharp. Have you ever read, by the way, Aristophanes' The Clouds? If you happen to, I did a little video on this. Actually, you might find it interesting on our iPUB, because Aristophanes includes in it this argument that there's this guy, a philosopher in a school. He's trying to bring a farmer into the philosophical school, and the farmer says, that he believes in Zeus, and the philosopher, who is Socrates in the play, says, no, there's no such thing as Zeus, And the farmer says, but where would the rain come from? And then Socrates gives this scientific explanation, natural explanation, and then he says, but what about this? And the farmer keeps saying things until finally Socrates has explained so much. The farmer says, there really is no reason to believe in Zeus. Yeah. It's quite fascinating that argument, which is real common today, is in an ancient Greek play. How about moral things, like where you're trying to decide? I know you've thought about this a ton. How do you go about saying this is right, this is wrong, these are things I promote, these are things I don't?
Yeah. I actually think a lot of it's not really conscious. Like it's not much of a thought process. But just naturally,
it just seems
it's
like
the way things go.
Yeah.
But then also, I think it depends on what we're talking about, I guess. But I think some things just seem to make sense naturally, and I know that I don't like the idea of using the Bible to decide on morals, because it's just more of God telling you what to do. I feel like the best thing that I hear from the religious side is that He put it on our hearts or whatever, or He gave that to us,
an embedded moral conscience.
Right. I think that one at least makes.
I'm actually in agreement with you that if you're just studying history, you could read Hammurabi's Code. Most of humanity through all of history has had a very similar kind of morality. It's not radically different. And there seems to be a kind of intuition we have that, hey, it's not good to murder, steal, and destroy your fellow citizens.
Right.
Nagel, is an atheist, but he accepts a natural teleology. So he thinks there is what are the equivalent, like he rejects the argument that if God doesn't exist, therefore there are no morals. And he actually has real credibility. But of course he accepts a teleological framework to do that, which it implies there's like a goal in mind with the universe. There's something teleological means there's a goal. At some point, these beliefs obviously take on have practical consequences that create trouble. The SSA students I'm talking to, are really, really, I believe, genuinely trying to be as tolerant as they can possibly be. So, they're not going to let a white supremacist into their groups.
Right.
But they're going to try to be as tolerant as possible. So when I ask them, what if a pro-Trump, pro-life, pro-traditional marriage person or group of persons want to come into SSA, and I would say they've been very honest. Some of them say it would be hard.
Yeah.
Others say we would want to do everything we can to do that. But, because the reason I was asking is because I get the impression SSA is a little more. I follow SSA on Twitter, and I engage occasionally on Twitter, and it seems to me more than just non-belief. There are actual beliefs, positive beliefs, advocating certain ideas, and those ultimately are value beliefs. Do you think I'm right about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, there's a couple. I think there's the next thing I'm going to after this
is a
little bit about that, and then we have a meeting tomorrow. I want to ask questions about, and I've even been part of this for years, but I actually want to ask questions about what our priorities are and like who our community's for and stuff like that, because like even at our own group there are there's conservatives and things like that, but they didn't come here, but I was thinking about them this weekend, and I was like, they wouldn't be comfortable with a lot of these talks.
Okay. Because there's a lot of conservatives, George Will, and there's a bunch of them that are atheists. Charles Krauthammer was an atheist who just passed away.
And I don't want them to not have community. Mm-hmm. So
But they would probably be pretty strong in some moral convictions that would be different from some of the values promoted here. You would agree with that,
right? Yeah.
Because that's what I've been asking. Is it would seem like that's the case.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's no explicit faith statement, so to speak, of what they believe.
Right.
But yet it kind of is clear from Twitter and from as I'm listening here at the conference, it certainly leans left.
Yeah.
And some of them have said there's some libertarians in their groups that seem to get on okay.
Yeah.
But even that's a little...
Right, and they can be all over the place, too. So,
right, they can be all over.
Yeah.
So, so I guess it's possible that might be a problem in the future, you think?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a problem now, or at least it is with me.
Really?
Because I agree with pretty much everything that we're doing, but I don't like excluding people from our community that our community is supposed to be for. Uh-huh. It's uncomfortable, even though I like I like what we're doing.
So you like the values it's promoting,
yeah.
But other people have different values.
Right. And I want to make sure they feel like they can be part of it, too.
It's very hard. historically, it's not normally the case that people unify around literally nothing.
Yeah. Right.
Except no who is it? Douglas Murray, who's a British conservative writer, atheist.
Yeah.
Right? Douglas Murray wrote a book on how religion needs to be revived in the UK.
Huh.
And that the UK needs to start listening again to some of the moral teachings of religion. Is definitely not an easy guy to peg as to what exactly you're going to get from him when you ask him a question. He is definitely conservative. And in political terms, quite strongly, writes for National Review here in America. Occasionally you'll see him writing here.
Yeah.
And he said, skepticism, I was very skeptical when I was in my 20s. He said, you can't build a civilization off of skepticism or around skepticism, At some point you have to be for something.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, there's some things that I think fall in, like even conservatives can agree on a lot of things. Like it's hard to be anti-gay. It exists, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very hard to be anti-gay if you're not religious.
Yeah.
Like on all sides, you're going to be
Yeah.
for separation of church and state.
Yeah.
Abortion can be a little mixed too.
Yeah.
But religion still has an influence there.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are a lot of things that we can still have, all
Yeah.
kinds of pretty solid,
Yes.
unifying.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of you. I mean, even
Right.
on some of the issues where you would let's just assume we have real big disagreements.
Yeah.
You still have to live in the same community.
Right.
So you still have to, the only thing to do is either you compromise in some way, or eventually you get so polarized and you're so distrusting you lead to civil war, which has
Yeah.
happened once, and it feels like it could happen again,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
horrifying.
Yes.
It's horrifying to think of that. But you can feel it. Like on Twitter, if you tweet the wrong thing,
Oh yeah.
and what you feel is, if I don't hate the person who tweeted the wrong thing, then people will turn on me because I
Yeah.
didn't express enough hate at this
No,
person.
I feel like I'm more cautious about what I say in my own circles.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid of being kicked out for having an opinion, which
Yeah.
is a crappy thing for a community of skeptics. I don't know.
It's definitely not good.
Yeah. I definitely find myself being
Yeah.
extra cautious about the words I use.
Yeah,
and-
I've really enjoyed the conversation. I would. We'll have to close it up.
Yeah.
But I really have enjoyed it. I could easily sit here and talk to you for
I
a
like
long
the
time.
way